Thank you very much, Tom, for those very poignant remarks. I think that frame the discussions over the next 2 days very well, and that also introduce some of the main themes and topics that we will be talking about in the various panels and sessions. Thank you very much. I'm going to call Chris Kabwatu to the front now to make some housekeeping announcements and also just tell us how things will proceed from now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Eamon. If Africa is to rise, there's one thing that we need to learn, and it's called timekeeping. So, being the dictator, old school headmaster that I am, we had reserved 90 minutes for lunch. We're going to eat into that. That means we'll reduce our lunch to 1 hour, and if we still don't keep our time, we're going to reduce that to 45 minutes. I think the program is more important. The lunch, well, it's on the lighter side, and we have a filling dinner in the evening. I'd like to call upon the next panel, the opening plenary session. It's called The Changing Global Order, Africa, India, China. The chair of that session is Depros Muchena. Depros is the Deputy Director at the Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa, or CISA. He's responsible for programs, strategy, coordination, quality and results. Depros, as I say it, please come through. The panelists for that, please come through. He joined OSISA in 2007 as the Economic Justice Program Manager before taking the position of Deputy Director in April 2010. During this time, he led OSISA's work on economic governance, developmental strategies, budget monitoring, as well as poverty and inequality. Prior to this appointment, Depros worked for USAID as senior democracy and governance advisor in Zimbabwe. He is co-editor of the book Tearing Us Apart, Inequalities in Southern Africa. We are launching this book this afternoon at 5:15 in the Africa Media Metrics building. Depros holds a master's degree from the University of Zimbabwe, where he studied economics and economic history. Depros, may we give a round of applause to our chair? Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you, Chris, for your lengthy submission of myself. I am very privileged to be here this morning. This is my first attendance of the highway event, even though you guys are saying it's 16 years. So you can ask where I was all this time. I always thought it was for journalists, but I was told, no, you can also come. So today, I'm pleased to moderate the first plenary session of the conference. And I think, yes, all the panels that you have here are very rich panels, but I think this is the richest panel. I just want to say a few words to introduce our discussion, and then I'll introduce our panel. We have been told that the conference theme is Africa Rising. This is now a theme that has become so much a repeated terminology across the continent and across the world as the economist retreats from its earlier position that we were a dark continent. But before that, I think there's a gentleman called Vinay Mahajan, who is former head of the Indian Business School at the University of Texas, who wrote a book called Africa Rising, How the 900 Million People Will Transform a New Market. I think he didn't put a question mark, he didn't put an exclamation mark, he just stated the facts. So he had no apologies to make. The Economist is in 6s and 7s trying to correct a position that they stated in 2000. One of the things that the Economist also said was that, in fact, the richest African or the richest person of African descent was no longer Oprah Winfrey with her $3 billion empire, but that it was now a comrade from Nigeria, Dakote, with 13.3 billion worth of wealth. So it was really now trying to put it on the continent, not just talk about Africa and the diaspora. This is quite an apology. We accept it, economist. In framing the debate about the changing global economic, social, and political order, I think one of the places where you can find that changing order is in three places. One is China. China represents a significant changing of the global economic, social, and political order. Not only does it confirm the earlier remark by Farid Zakaria of the post-American world, but it actually represents a new footprint of economic and social development that we had not seen in the last 2 decades. We all know now that China is referred to as the second largest economy in the world, contested because others think it's actually the largest economy in the world now, because everything else is happening in the United States, which demonstrates no size, no strength, and other things. In 2004, China overtook Italy, followed by France, followed by Germany, and followed by Japan, as not only the largest holder of foreign currency, about $1 trillion in 2004, but also in terms of GDP size and the ability of the country to produce a middle class and take people out of poverty. This rise resulted in China beginning to host annual summits called China-Africa Summits. And these China-Africa Summits have been significant demonstration of the love of the political elite on the continent of this country and what it stands for, win-win and all those things. Not to be outdone, Japan has also now started having its own Africa Tokyo Summit, which also groups African countries together and discuss bilateral trade, investment, and other relations. India felt that it was also their time. So they now also host an India-Africa Summit, which brings African leaders, hosted by one leader in India. And South Africa is the African country that is now touted as a member of this bloc. So these countries represent the changing global order in terms of their contribution, their economic size, as well as the role that they play at the United Nations when from time to time they stand up and oppose a motion that will be coming from the United States. So this session is about looking at how the media has framed this changing global economic and social order, but in particular to seek to understand how the nationals of each of these countries are also looking at events internally within India, within China, within Brazil, although Brazil is not represented, within South Africa, so that we can get a sense of whether the global changing order is being reflected internally, or there are in fact contradictions that are more frightening to talk about. So to kickstart this discussion, we have a very active panel which will assist us to unpack first China, and we have let's start with Amina on my far left, not in any ideological sense. Amina is a fairly eminent journalist, South African born, and works for the South African Broadcasting Corporation. Amina is well known in particular for being the associate producer of a film, Mandela, which really depicts the life of President Mandela that she did. She has authored books. She has been very instrumental in shaping the media landscape in terms of news and broadcast. And she will be talking more about South Africa's narrative and the role that the media is playing in depicting this global changing order. Next to her is Professor An Bin Shi from China, from the University, it's very difficult, Tsinghua University in China, and he's a professor of media studies with specialization in media, culture, and so on. He will shape for us what's happening in China and how China is actually changing the face of the media more globally. And he has an interesting PowerPoint that he will show for just a few minutes. And then closer to home, we have Professor Mbai Cham, who teaches at Howard University in the African Studies program, and is also the chair of that department. But he has a lot of Gambian blood in him, so don't see him as representing anyone from the United States. Welcome home. Then finally we have Vipul Mugdal, who is from India Center for the Study of Developing Societies, a journalist himself, a practitioner who is very critical about developments in India, but is also able to tell the story of how India is becoming a global player within the global community of affairs. So we have these four to give us a very exciting 10 minutes each presentation, or at least up to 10 minutes each. I will be a dictator for time because Chris has already threatened me several times this morning. So I want to start with Ann Bin Shi, who will give us a little bit of talking points on China, and then I will be talking about the person who comes next. Over to you. Do you want to come here or do you want to speak from there? You want to stand here? Okay.
PDF that he gave us. Yeah. Do you wanna just start speaking?
I have the privilege to share with you some thoughts of the international journalism in China. I would rather limit my talk in 10 minutes so we can have more time to share more questions or interactions between panelists. I would define China, to borrow the term from Susan Shirk, a professor from the United States, as a fragile superpower. I think the most potent symbol of China, the position of China, either the economy, as just our moderator just indicated, the second largest economy in the world, and also the media development. Now we have the so-called charm campaign across the world, that China has already expanded its media influence across the world. But still we see Yang Ming would symbolize this fragile superpower. It's a superpower, but it's still growing, it's still changing, it's still transforming, and it still must face with a lot of internal conflict and contradictions, and also external challenges and abuses. I would rather very quickly skip the number. Of course, China now rises to the #1 media marketplace in the world. As you can see that now in the United States, people talk about death of newspaper, or some professor predicted death of television. But in China, I can see no death of either of the media, because no matter it's newspaper or magazine or TV or film and internet, all seems to be rising, just like the rise of Africa. But I think the rise of all forms of media is also very transparent in China, that we have the largest users of nearly every types of media in China, both in South, North, and West and East. We have this very diversified regional development in China. But of course, now the charm campaign I just mentioned has become a national campaign supported by the central government. As you can see that in many Western countries, including United States and UK and other Western countries, they now reduce the number of what we call the international communication media outlet and also correspondent in various countries. But China seems to be in another direction, because we have supported our national media to expand across the world. A more potent example would be this, like CCTV North American headquarters now open in Washington, D.C. It's become a kind of symbol of China's expansion of media influence in the world. And of course, as a media educator myself, Tsinghua University, as one of the most prestigious universities in China, and also become a talent pool. And we get funding from the government to train the international journalists. Actually, this time when I came to South Africa, we have met our former student, now working with the South African Bureau of People's Daily. So this is only one of these kind of the trainees that we have trained for the country's charm campaign. But I would also think China's Chime campaign also echoes the world's need that the new UNESCO's campaign for New World Information and Communication Order NWICO. I would rather see many developing countries now see China should be the leader of renovating this new NWICO, which already initiated in 1970s. But of course, because of the boycott of United States, an NWICO campaign will become a dream. Now seems that China's rise to the world power to make this initiation of NWICO a dream come true. And the other campaign that many of you might be familiar is also what we call the model circular for journalism education, initiated by the UNESCO to promote exchanges between journalism educators around the world. But I should use this 5 kind of contradictions. Now in China, like I said, we are emerging superpower or fragile superpower featured by many contradictions and also contests. The first layers of contest and contradictions is in China now we still have these 2 models which are rising together and have some competition, which is the partisan and market-driven model of media. The second would be the digital immigrant versus digital native. If I may explain that, the digital immigrant would be the person like myself, would be called digital immigrant because we learn to use how to use the social media and the internet when we become grown-ups. But of course now we have a group of young generation in China who become the backbone of this digital revolution in China. They are born with the digital media, just like many digital natives across the world. So now many digital immigrants become the censors, or the professors, or the person who holds discursive power now in China, where they have faced the challenges, of course, from digital natives, and usually they become the new generation of citizen journalists in China. And the third layers would be the global media's penetration versus indigenous resistance. We can offer many examples. One immediate example would be the Hollywood. Because of this kind of global local resistance, the past summer, the July and August